Hello, and welcome to the Elevate Entrepreneur, where we decode the success of some of the greatest entrepreneurs that I've met, that I know, that I trust. These individuals have not only built their business up, but they've also impacted lives for the better. Here you will learn not only how to grow your business, but also inspire you to want to be just a little bit better. I'm your host, Raylan Davis. My entire intention is to remove obstacles and excuses as to why people can't realize they deserve more. With that being said, let's jump into this week's episode. Stay motivated, stay elevated. First and foremost, Justin, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I appreciate you. I'm also really excited to have another sales-minded person come on the podcast. I'll be honest with you. So I started my journey as a digital entrepreneur as a sales coach. And what I found to be super interesting, I want to kind of hear your 2 cents on this, is how much of the basics that people didn't know. So I came from a corporate sales background. I was a sales consultant. I basically flew around the country and went to all of our locations and did all that, and did all the sales coaching thing. And then when I went online, it was the basics of like, oh, you're not even reaching out to people. So I love that you mentioned in here about the sales mindset. So first and foremost, talk to me a little bit about your journey of becoming a coach online. How did you get your start, and maybe that aha moment that moved you to wanting to do this and kind of take that plunge into online or just entrepreneurship in general?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me on the podcast. And it's a great first question. I'll share that for me, I've been in sales since I was 18. I sold Cutco kitchen knives, direct sales, in-home presentations.
Dude, those are good knives.
Oh my gosh, they're the best. Yeah, they're the best there is. And I actually loved that job. I was there for almost 5 years and sold a couple $100,000 worth of knives, ran my own office and trained a sales team there. Then I did a little bit of business to business sales in my 20s, got into financial planning for a few years. And ultimately, I hired some coaches along the way. As a salesperson, as an entrepreneur, I hired Hal Elrod as my first coach in 2009. Later, I hired Ben Skemper and Epic Impact to coach me on my journey. And at some point along the line, I realized I loved the work that they were doing and providing for me so much that I wanted to do the same kind of work. And so I decided to launch a coaching business. My coach, though, at the time was a startup and said, we need help with our business. We need help with sales. So they hired me to come in and do the sales for their startup business. Took them from 6 clients to 70 clients in the time that I was there as a lead salesperson, and over $1 million in annual revenue. We didn't even have a website. We didn't have any marketing or ads. It was like old school, reach out to people, get referrals, be a little bit scrappy, and just have a high volume of calls, working really hard. And so I learned sales and business and coaching through that experience. And ultimately, at some point along the line, realized that some of the values of the company and the direction they were going wasn't the direction I wanted to go. And so I decided to leave and start my own business, Faith to Influence, in 2019. And the business took off. It was initially a men's group for Christian male entrepreneurs who were in all kinds of different fields. And it was about working through their business and their family and their faith and kind of bringing these 3 pieces together. And in the first year, the business did far more than I anticipated. We did a little over $250,000 in revenue in year 1. And from there, I realized that some of the coaches or some of the entrepreneurs I had in the program were coaches, and they wanted to build coaching businesses. And as I coached them and worked with them, I recognized that working with them was the most compelling of all my clients. And so I decided to narrow in the niche a little bit and work specifically with coaches. And what I recognize about coaches is most people who want to be a coach have a great heart for service. They've got a great skill set around coaching and communication and leadership. But what they struggle with is the business side of building a coaching business: sales, marketing, prospecting, money mindset, business model design, all of those things. And so that's what's really easy for me and what I'm really good at. And I decided I wanted to bring that to people.
Was it hard for you to make that decision to lean into your faith for your business? And the reason I asked that is because I've had three different clients now, because I don't know if you know this, but we have a podcast agency, but more than podcasting, we're more so about like thought leadership on YouTube. Like that's our thing, right? We want the right voices. We want content that matters. So anyway, we had 3 clients at one point that had a very strong relationship with God. And every single one of them asked me the same question. which is like, hey, like, should I just not talk about this online? And my whole thing was, I don't know if there's a guy named Pedro Aldo, and
Pedro
he's
Deo.
Adeo. Okay, yeah, so you
Yeah.
know him, the
I actually do
challenge god.
sales. I've done sales for Pedro at his
Yes.
events. He's hired us. Yeah.
So as you know, he's like the challenge god, right? And
Hmm.
the example I always give is his kingdom. What is it? The wisdom kingdom. The
100x.
No, it's kingdom challenge.
Okay. Sure.
And so essentially, it's like I was like, it's a 30-day Bible study. It's
Hmm.
a glorified 30-day Bible study where they
Hmm.
basically just read from the Bible for 30 days,
Hmm.
and he sells like a $25,000 package at the back end
Hmm.
of it, makes as you know,
Hmm.
millions of dollars. So I
Hmm.
always give that example and going, yeah, you could definitely talk about your faith. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't,
Yeah.
like, look, then which sounds odd coming from someone like me. Like, my whole brand is around swearing, but like, you
Hmm.
definitely could do it. So was that
Hmm.
hard for you to make that decision to go, no, I'm leaning into this?
Yeah. Well, something I learned when I was in financial planning was becoming known for something specifically in the marketplace was of the greatest value. And differentiating yourself from others in the marketplace was of the greatest value. And so we want to narrow our niche as coaches, as entrepreneurs, as much as possible. And that's going to expand our reach and our success. And it's counterintuitive. A lot of people think, oh, no, I want to help everybody. I don't want to
Yeah.
exclude anybody. But by narrowing our niche and saying, like, okay, I'm going to focus on this faith piece as a coach for Christian coaches, it differentiates me. When my ideal audience sees my messaging, they say, oh my gosh, maybe this is something I can trust because sales is hard for me. Sales feels sleazy. Sales feels like manipulative and like it lacks integrity. It doesn't honor my values. That's why sales is hard for me. But if this guy's a Christian in sales, maybe he'll honor my values and find a different way
Mhm.
forward. And I think that I do that really well. The content that I teach is just as effective for non-Christians as it is for Christians. It's
Of
business
course.
content. By being explicitly Christian, though, it allows me to pray with my clients. It allows me to create an environment that feels like really safe for them. And I also attract non-Christian clients. And I'm willing to work with them too, because again, the content is secular. It's like really good business content for anyone. But by narrowing who I want to work with, I actually make myself more interesting in the marketplace. I make myself stand out in a sea of so many coaches. And so I would encourage people, if your faith is a part of you and what you do, it's important to you, and you want to work with those specific types of clients, then go ahead and include it. It's also okay for somebody to be a faith-based person and not have that at the forefront of their brand. I
Yeah.
talk to Christians about the fact that they can disciple kind of covertly in the marketplace, and there's a wonderful place for that too. So the most important thing I think is that we show up in a way that honors whatever our faith and values are, whatever's most important about who we are, and that we're authentic in the marketplace. For me, choosing to include my faith in my business allows me to be more authentic and serve in a way that's really compelling. And I know that by narrowing, I can find that Christian coaches specifically might have a shared set of problems, challenges, mindset issues that they gathered in the church since they were little and have had
Mhm.
a hard time breaking through certain old patterns.
Well, too, I think it gives you a really an upside in terms of having a good mindset philosophy to go back on. Like, one of the
Mm-hmm.
things I always say, because I grew up in the church, like I grew up in a Baptist church, and literally, I'm not joking. My first time I ever thought about sales was because my uncle was a pastor,
Mm-hmm.
was how he was selling the message of God. I was like, I want,
Mm-hmm.
like, I literally for a minute, I'm not joking, was like, I want to be a pastor.
Mm-hmm.
And it really was because, but I realized it's funny, like, so our brand strategist, he's kind of like the partner in the agency. He told me
Mm-hmm.
once this great piece of advice. He goes, there are pastors and then there's evangelists. He goes, you're an evangelist. Like, you need to lean into that. You're not the community guy. You're not that. Stop trying to be that. Like, you're the
Mm-hmm.
evangelist. And I see
Mm-hmm.
that you have the believe sticker behind you. So I know you'll understand this reference as well. He said, you need to stop trying to be Ted Lasso and be Jamie
Yeah.
Tart because you're
Yeah.
Jamie Tart. And I was like,
Yes.
oh my God, like, dude, it's such a good point. But anyway,
Yeah.
but my point is though, like, it's like for us, for my clients, I lean on a lot of like Stoic philosophy, landmark,
Mm.
and overall, like, more like, if you've ever read like the Four Agreements, right? Like that
Mm-hmm.
kind of style. But that gives me what we call the 5 laws. Like one of them is like, you're the source, be impeccable with your word. Like it's almost like our 10 commandments. But the cool thing about what you do is when you find entrepreneurs or coaches that have that Christian faith, you can, it's built in. Like you have your 10 commandments already. You know what I mean? Like, hey, and then also let's talk about the endless source of inspiration that you can gather from the Bible. Like, hey, by the way, Job went through this, you know what I mean? Like, or Moses went through this, and here's what, you know. So I think that's actually really interesting, coming from that, and like having a built-in philosophy in your coaching program, because again, you come from that faith-based.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you like Ted Lasso. It's my favorite show on TV right now. I highly recommend it to everybody. But no doubt, like we have to find our authentic leadership voice, and yours is going to sound different than mine. And across the listeners to this podcast, there's going to be dozens, if not hundreds or thousands of different leadership voices and styles. And the thing that was really helpful for me in my career was settling into my authentic leadership voice, being true to who I am. You know, if your brand is a little bit more intense, a little bit more direct, then you should be that
tough love.
Tough love, absolutely. Yeah. And if you know a listener's personal brand is more like soft, you know, there's some people who have like a softer brand, but it allows people to open up to opportunities and ideas in a different way, then be that way. There's ultimately so many people in the world. There's so many people in the marketplace that there's always going to be a tribe for each individual if they're willing to be true to themselves.
Yeah. So let's jump into sales now. All right. So first and foremost, I got to plug this because again, I love the fact you were able to get this URL. We talked about this before we hit record, but salesisgood.com is your challenge. Walk me through again some of the challenges that you found with your clients when it comes to sales, and how you kind of help them overcome some of those mindset challenges, and also that ability to be scrappy at the start. I think people have this interesting idea around, hey, I'm just going to make reels on Instagram and I'm going to get leads. And when you first start, nobody knows who the hell you are. And like, it's a numbers game in terms of reach out to people and let them know that you can help them. And so walk me through, you know, some of that and some of the things you do with your clients on that front.
Yeah, for sure. I think you just hit on one of the big challenges that people have. Is I think that people have believed an illusion and a lie of passive income, and they just want it to be super easy. And anybody who's ever had passive income knows that it's actually active income. It takes a lot of work to create income that seems to the outside eye as to be passive. And so I think, yeah, people play what I would call the long game rather than the short game. The short game is, what can I do today, this week, and this month to make more sales this year? The long game is, what can I do to build a following and nurture that audience so that 10 years from now, 20 years from now, I've got the kind of group that I could send an email to and close a deal in. You know, I've got a friend, Dan Miller, who has been running his coaching business for something like 25 years, and he's released a podcast episode every week for 25 years. He has sent a weekly newsletter every week for 25 years. He's never missed an email. He's never missed a podcast episode. That's what I would call the long game, that email sequence, that podcast work. He's written a couple of books. He's a best-selling author. These are all long game activities, and they've worked in such a way that he can have a $48 offer and make 1,100 sales into his $48 membership, which is 600 grand a year, before his higher level masterminds and all the other stuff. But I think people see or hear something like that, and they're like, oh yeah, I want a $48 a month program, which is never going to help people achieve their goals. And ultimately they're creating that low price membership in most cases because they have a fear around money and charging a higher price or a fair price for their services. And so they want to earn 100 grand, but they want to have a $50 a month program. And they don't recognize that that's going to take,
how much more work?
200 clients or something. Like, making 200 sales is difficult. And they also don't realize that, like, they can't send out an email and get results until they have an audience. They're not going to make sales because they started a podcast until they've done the podcast for quite a while and built quite a following. The writing a book, if no one knows you, and self-publishing it isn't going to be super effective. People will do everything they can to avoid sales. I know coaches who they've revised their website for the fourth or fifth time and they have 0 clients. That next revision of your website doesn't mean anything. And they're like asking me the question, should I put prices on my website or not? And I'm like, no one's going to find your website and click and buy. So if we want to start out as a new coach, the biggest opportunity would be to say, who do I already know who fits my target market, to make a list of those people. Who do I know who respects me, loves me, trusts me, and would make referrals for me if I had a conversation telling them what I was doing, and make those 2 big lists simultaneously. Go through your entire phone, go through all your social media, make these 2 lists on a spreadsheet, and then contact them, send a text message, say, hey, I don't know if you know this or not, but I started a business. I'm doing this. I thought of you. I wanted to know if you'd be open to getting on a call to talk about it and learn more, to see if it might be a fit for you or someone you know. And like actually getting on real calls, having real conversations, eyeball to eyeball, and inviting people to something that has value is so much easier. If you want to have a $100,000 business instead of a $50 a month program where you need 200 sales, what if you had a $10,000 program and you only needed 10 sales? I guarantee you making 10 sales at a higher price is way easier than making 200 sales at a lower price. But the thing that people have to get through before they get into like the sales avoidance, long game versus short game mess, trying to do everything that they see people doing in the marketplace that works for coaches who are $1 million coaches, but not brand new coaches. They have to first get around the mindset that they have around sales and around money. And they have to get strong in their own identity and know who they are and believe in who they are, believe that they can do it. If we don't have an identity or story around sales and money that supports us getting on those sales calls, we're not going to have a really hard time doing it. If we think, I had a friend, her name was Sarah. She was in my church in Colorado and she came over to my house and a bunch of people were over. We'd been friends for years. And she said in front of everybody, sales is manipulation. All sales is manipulation. All salespeople are manipulative. I said, Sarah, you've been my friend for years. You know me. I'm in sales. She said, she held to her story. All salespeople are manipulative. All sales is manipulation. If she believes that story and all of a sudden feels called into a coaching business because she wants to help people, well, all of a sudden she's going to recognize, oh my gosh, I have to get on sales calls. I can't do that because I'm not manipulative. And so unless she shifts that story, she's not going to be able to do it. And so we have to identify what are the stories we have around sales and money and our own value that need to be shifted and changed. And we might need to recognize that, like, even if we believed in the past sales is pushy or sales is sleazy or sales is bad, you might recognize that that's not so true. You could write down on a piece of paper, cross it out, draw a line through it, maybe write underneath a true, more empowering story like sales with me is. And so even if you thought sales is manipulative, well, maybe it's not with you if you're not a manipulative person. So you might say sales with me is service. Sales with me is love. Sales with me is good. Salesisgood.com. Sales with me is leadership. Sales with me is coaching. And so if we get strong stories about what sales is, I believe that sales, when done right, is simply leadership with an invitation at the end. It's coaching. It's tough love, like you talked about, and an invitation to help people become more of who they were meant to become and get more of what they want in their life. But we have to have empowering stories about ourselves and about sales and about money. Like, there are Christians who think money's the root of all evil. Well, the Bible says love of money, which is making it an idol, making it too important, is where a lot of evil comes. I think people can probably recognize the truth in that, even non-Christians. But I believe the more I earn, the more I can give. So I've got a really empowering story about money. I want to earn as much as I possibly can because I'm going to give more and more and more when I do so. And so I think we have to get right on some of that stuff, which makes then executing a strong, high integrity, high conversion sales process a lot easier.
First of all, that in itself, I think, is incredibly helpful in reevaluating your own stories and being honest. You have to be honest about it, right? Like, where does this come from? Why do I even like feel this way about sales? And, you know, one of the things that I've often said to people is like, look, like, okay, cool. You think sales is manipulative, whatever. Okay, then walk me through your strategy and how you're going to make money. Like, I'd love to hear it, because it's like, look, if you can have a nonprofit, but guess what? Even nonprofit have to sell. It's called getting donors. So walk me through how you're gonna live. Like, it's one of those things. But I want to talk to you about your long term. Like, what is your long term strategy? You mentioned the short term. The short term is on the sales side, having conversations on that. Because here's what I have found. Because this is my issue that I've had with sales coaches in the past. Right, I've come to our agency and things like that, or even just having conversations with salespeople. I think, you know, in the last year, we've had maybe one sales coach that we've worked with, and he was a smart guy. Most salespeople are incredibly short-term thinkers, incredibly. And so they're on this hamster wheel of, I have to have X amount of dials, X amount of reach outs, X amount of whatever every single month, and that's all that matters. And that's
Mm-hmm.
cool.
Yeah.
But what if there's another way, which is the
Mm-hmm.
long term, right? So walk me through
Mm-hmm.
your long term strategy, how you're thinking about the long term of your brand authority, really. And I know you have a
Yeah.
podcast. I know you do think long term because, as you
Yeah.
know, you can't just start a podcast and then today you make money from the listeners.
Right.
So walk me through your long term strategy.
Yeah. So to give some context, I think it's most important for the new coach to play the short game. And
Mm,
as we hit a certain benchmark, I call it financial viability or minimum financial viability, which means earning enough to provide for the needs of your business and your family. So for that number is different for everyone. Maybe for you it's 50,000, maybe it's 70, maybe it's 100, maybe it's 200. Whatever that number is, when we hit that initial number by playing the short game, just focus on how can I get some sales, how can I get some wins, some experience, some testimonials. Once we've hit that minimum financial threshold, then we should start playing the long game alongside the short game. We should be playing both at the same time. And so for me, yes, the short game was building a business of multiple six figures. The long game is finding ways to do things that are easier, lighter. I'm not an ultimate hustler. I probably don't have as big of a hustle muscle as some of your listeners. I really enjoy my time with my family. I'm wearing this
mm,
silly Groot shirt. It was my 3-year-old's birthday this week, and he wanted to have a superhero themed birthday, and so Groot was my superhero,
yeah.
and he's pretty cool. We've got a kind of a family joke with baby Groot. My wife kind of announcing that we were having a baby through like telling me we were going to have a baby Groot because she loved that movie,
Yeah.
and so for me, I value that time with my family. I value free time. I actually work better when I work less. And
Mm,
so I want to be as efficient as I possibly can. And so while we're playing the short game of saying, how can we make a sale this week? We're also playing some long games now, including the podcast. So we've got a podcast releasing each week. And my expectation for that is that 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, that podcast is going to have a lot of fruit. I'm also getting on other people's podcasts like this and speaking virtually as much as I can to build an audience and making sure that I always have a free lead magnet, a way that people can come into our audience and get on our email list. I think when I was new as a coach, I didn't recognize the value of email. It's so much more valuable than social media. If
so
I
many
make a,
people like again going back to I have the again I'm thinking about there's two people in particular
yeah,
that I was talking about their email list,
yeah,
and it was almost like at a point of pride that they didn't have a newsletter, and I was
yeah,
like, okay, cool, but like here's the thing, right? We're doing all this
mm-hmm,
YouTube content, um, and like let's take Instagram for example. Depending on your ability for reach, if
mm-hmm,
you have 2,000 followers, what is 150, 200, maybe 300 are going to see it versus your
mm-hmm,
newsletter. As long as you have a good newsletter, you can
mm-hmm.
get 60 to 70% of the people to view it. So
Yeah,
what are we talking about here? So it's good that at
yeah.
least you're not like the stereotypical sales coach. You're like, email marketing is bullshit.
No, my recognition is that like a lot of social media is less valuable than we think, but it can be any of the social media sites can be incredibly valuable for somebody who works hard at it over an extended period of time. And so if you love video and you want to get into YouTube, great. If you love the written word and you want to be writing articles on LinkedIn, great. I mean, whatever it is, any of these social media sites can be really effective if employed well over a long, extended period of time. That's the long game strategy. For me, we've engaged in Facebook a lot, and I recognize if I make a post on Facebook, maybe 100 people see it, and if I send an email to a list of 3,000, over 1,000 people open that email every single time. I can see the statistics, and so an emails can reach way more people than a social media post. And so I really want to grow our email list. And once you have a 20, 25,000 person email list, you can send out an email and make sales. And that's like that
Yeah.
dream of kind of passive income. A lot of work went into that, but I really want to speak and get in front of our audience as often as possible. Entrepreneurs, Christian entrepreneurs when we can, coaches when we can, to narrow even more specifically, and share great, valuable content and invite people to something that's free, that's going to add value to them, get them on our email list so that they can see the other cool things that we're doing. Having the weekly podcast also gives us something to email, but provides value in the word format. And then I'm in the works on like starting early stages to write a book. And there's some other things that are on my mind that are important to me over time in a long game strategy, including a lower price membership program. But I think those things are secondary to the short game. So once we've like provided those initial needs, we've gotten real sales, we've gotten real results with some clients, then starting to say, what are one or two or three of these things I can work on consistently over an extended period of time to get great results. I've got one friend who he's in like the healing space, like physical healing when people are in chronic pain. And he started 4 years ago doing YouTube videos, like 5 minutes, 8 minutes. He shares them on Facebook also, like less than 8 minutes a day, but he's done it every day for 4 years. And now he's got $100 a month program. He's got 180 people in it. That's $18,000 a month. And all he's doing is that 4 to 8 minute YouTube video each day to bring people in. And like Dan Miller, neither of these guys are like the flashiest, most impressive marketers you've ever seen. They're just really consistent with their strategy. And so I think finding that's important for me. I think it's going to be podcasting and speaking. And for others, it might be more along the side of writing or social media. And whatever that is, I think having one or two strategies is great. Trying to do all things at all times is probably too much unless you've got a really big and successful team.
Yeah, well, also for me, like when I first started, or a couple years in, I went omnipresent because I had a team. Well, I still have one, but so I was able to do it. And here's what I found: I'm actually like, I stripped everything down, and now my main thing, the main thing I create for specifically is YouTube. And the reason for that is because it's middle of the funnel. It's not top of the funnel like Instagram, because people are searching for that thing. And what I have found is there's other ways that you can monetize your YouTube channel instead of just waiting for the monetization to happen. And the way that I use it, that I think, again, as a salesperson, you'll appreciate, is I use it as a way for more context. So for example, if somebody reaches out and goes like, I know they're not financially ready to work with me, and they ask me a question, I just send them over to because I do master classes on YouTube. Hey, watch this. As one thing I always talk about is the amount of sales equals trust. Like if somebody buys from you, they have to have trust. Well, how do you measure trust? It's time. The more time you spend with me, the more likelihood you're going to buy. So that's why I think every coach I talk to, I'm like, we need to start a YouTube channel, because the idea is they're going to watch your content every single week, even with your podcast. If we simply just took your podcast and put it over YouTube, people are watching you. They feel like you're their coach. So when they're ready to make a decision, who do you think you're going to go to? Right? Like they're going to go to you. And so if you're, for me anyway, if you're going to do a long-term strategy in terms of social media, like YouTube is like the biggest thing. The other thing I like about it too is on the email marketing side, you can write the email and then go, hey, if you want to actually like learn more about it, here's this free training I made for you on YouTube.
Totally. Yeah.
The other thing I love about email marketing too is seeing, like, I have an example of somebody that signed up for one of our things, and I saw her read my email, open every email for a year. And so you could see it and you go, I know this person's going to convert soon. Like I just gotta, as long as I give them the invitation, I know they'll convert. And so it's interesting to see. And then also it's really good for your business if you look at it and go, all right, I just did this last week, and there's like 40 people that had read every single email but hasn't opted in to the business. So now it's this question of, okay, why haven't they converted yet? And so I reached out to one of them. This was actually not too long ago. And I literally I picked up the phone. By the way, people, it's okay to call people. And I called her and I said, why haven't you converted yet? Literally just flat out, like, I know you read every single email. I know you see the PS line. Why haven't you converted? And she just goes, I don't know. I'm like, all right, well, and then she signed up. Like, that was it. But it's a really good, I like email marketing in that I realized an error that we were doing was like, we're not being as assertive as we could about here's the invitation. So it helps you, I think it helps you kind of like test things out. Like, again, email marketing in sense of like testing, I think gets, everyone looks at it as a way to make money, but it's also a really, really good way to test things in your business.
Oh yeah. It's great for tracking and seeing what's working and what doesn't. It's really interesting.
Yeah. So then you mentioned earlier before we started recording, a process you have. Actually, let me back up. Rejection. So the biggest reason why people don't like sales, right? Or to do sales is that I'm going to reach out and I'm going to say, here's how I can help you. And there's a really good chance you leave me on red or you say no. And that sucks. So
Yeah.
how do you help your clients overcome that fear of rejection, or just rejection in general? Because again, the thing that you and I have that is a benefit is that we worked in sales before. So we understand
Mhm.
that just rejection just comes a part of it, and there's ways that you can improve and so on and so forth. But what is your mindset around rejection, and how do you help people overcome it?
Well, you made a good point. It's easy for us because we've been in sales for a long time. We understand it's a part of it. We've been through it. And so there's no substitute for volume. The more you get rejected, the more you have success, the more you get everything kind of stirred up in the pot, you have real life experience and it makes things easier. And if you're consistently in action, consistently prospecting, consistently making efforts, you're on to the next group of messages the next day or the next week. The messages from last week become less and less important. I probably don't recognize who hasn't responded because I'm sending a
Mm-hmm.
message to somebody new. And that said, I'll also make the point that I think we need to reframe what it is that we're doing when we're trying to ask somebody to get on a sales call with us. To me, it's an invitation. It's the same thing with our offer. When we actually get to the end of the call and we make an offer, we're simply extending an invitation. And I think that in my experience in life, people like receiving invitations. There are all kinds of people who can't come to the party. Like I said, it was Gavin's third birthday party. It's spring break. A lot of people couldn't make it. And I don't think any of them were offended that we invited them to something that
Mm-hmm.
they either didn't respond to or didn't show up to or said, oh man, we can't make it. Maybe next time. I think that what happens is people get offended when they're not invited. And so if all of a sudden we're posting pictures of Gavin's birthday party and somebody who thinks they should have been invited wasn't, then they're like, how come you didn't invite me to this? And
Mm-hmm.
so like I think that invitations feel good. You invite people to your wedding, a lot of them aren't going to come, but it feels good to be invited. People get upset when they're not invited. But the other thing is to recognize where your responsibility ends and their responsibility begins. Our responsibility as coaches, as leaders, as entrepreneurs, as salespeople is to invite. That's our job. It's to invite. And at some level, we have to trust the other person to make a decision. Now, we want to be as influential as we possibly can, helping them make the best decision for themselves. My belief is that sales is making it as easy as possible for the right people to say yes. And I also recognize that I'm not going to make a decision for anyone. They're going to make their decision. And I can trust that they're going to make the best decision for themselves. And it's not necessarily going to have to do anything with me. A rejection or a no, it's not a rejection of me and who I am. It's them just evaluating their situation, where they're at, what they know, and deciding yes or no for themselves. And I'm going to trust people to be adults and make a decision and allow them to make their decision. And I'm going to love and respect them whether they say yes or no. And as long as I do that, they'll do the same for me. I think people worry like, what are they going to think of me? And is it going to be weird? Well, it's only going to be weird if you're weird.
Yeah.
And so like if you're chill and you love and respect them regardless of what they do or don't do, and you're just extending an invitation and you treat them well and you coach and sell in such a way that it feels like great leadership. I have people cry on sales calls and not buy, but it was like an incredibly impactful conversation. There's nothing to feel bad about there. I'm just inviting them to something I know is going to be great because that call is going to provide great clarity, great insight, help them get clear on their goals, help them identify problems that they want to solve. I mean, it's going to be worth a lot whether they buy or not. So I just know that I'm inviting people to something good. I believe in myself. I trust them to make the best decision for themselves. I separate myself from that decision to a certain degree, and that all makes it a lot easier. But the reps are important.
Well, something you mentioned too is like you're not assigning meaning to it. Like
Yeah.
people do this thing where someone says no, oh, the means of the technique is not good and I'm not good and I shouldn't do that. Like there's all this meaning attached to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you decide not to do it anymore. But the
Mm-hmm.
truth is like as long as you take the lesson and then you just move on, or as Ted Lasso would say, be a goldfish, right?
Yeah,
You're gonna
exactly.
see the results. And I really, it really pains me when I see people lose sight of this. I remember, I've had coaches I used to work with, again, when I was primarily doing the sales coaching before. I'd work with somebody I just had a small 2-month program, because also the other thing is I was like, I don't, we don't need 6 months to teach you sales. Like it's not, it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have to be that long. But in the 2 months, people's sales would go up, they would crush it. And then I'd follow up with them a couple months later, and they were back to where they were. And
Mm-hmm.
I was always like, okay, what happened? Oh, they just stopped doing the things that worked, which was reaching
Mm-hmm.
out to people. Why? Because they got a couple no's, and they didn't
Mm-hmm.
have someone like me or like you telling them stop
Mm-hmm.
worrying about that. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing because we've all had those messages where you reach out and go, hey, I think I can help you. And somebody goes, oh, this is sleazy, or you
Mhm.
didn't even do this, you didn't do enough. Like, it's interesting to me how many people. This is also why, and I'll ask you about your favorite lead generation platform, but that's why I love LinkedIn.
Mhm.
Instagram, people on Instagram want you to take them out to dinner,
Mhm.
buy their kid, their firstborn son, a birthday gift before you ask them to a sales call.
Mhm.
There's a lot of work you have to put in to even
Mhm.
ask. Versus on LinkedIn, they're like, I remember when I first started on LinkedIn and doing prospecting on LinkedIn, I had so many people like respond back and was like, just get to the damn point. Like,
Mhm.
can you help me? Yes or no? And I was like, oh shit, all right. So then I started making very direct message on LinkedIn saying, this is what we do. Here's how I think I can help.
Mhm.
Is this worth the conversation? And
Yeah.
so many people were like, dude, thank you. Like, thanks for getting to the point. So
Yeah.
what is your favorite, like, how are you generating leads today for your coaching business?
It's going to seem really old fashioned and boring, but I genuinely do find that my very best lead source is people I know. It's what I call my natural market. And if I'm in the marketplace doing things, I'm always growing that list. I'm always meeting new people. And if you've got something of great value to provide and you're networking with and spending time with people in your target market, and you're willing to invite, there's always going to be opportunity for you. And I don't mean networking like going to a networking event that's free and like passing out business cards. Like even the idea of business cards is something that I'm a no to. I would never ever give a business card to someone at this point. If I meet somebody and it makes sense for us to have a conversation, I think I can help them. And I'm like, hey, we should follow up sometime. They're like, yeah, let's do it. I'm like, awesome. Like, do you have your calendar on you right now? Let's book the call. And I'm going to
Yeah,
pull up my phone. I'm going to book the call. We all have a calendar on our phone. We can book it right now so that we can have that time on Zoom and get to know each other and make a decision on whether or not to move forward. And so that's still the best source is people I know. And there's ultimately like depending on where you're at in your life and your career, that's easier for some people and more difficult for others. But the encouragement would be, regardless of where you're at, it's be in preparation to like build your brand through developing a really important skill set that solves a problem that people have, and also developing your character to the point that you're someone that people want to work with, somebody that people want to give referrals to, which is my second favorite source. If it's not somebody I know, I want to be introduced by someone I know to somebody who may need what I have. If I'm going to go beyond that, my next favorite source would be speaking, and
mm,
I get invited to speak at other people's masterminds because I've got a certain like character and value and relational equity that I've developed over a long period of time where people want to work with me. But then also, I've got a skill set around sales that not everyone has. And so, there's other masterminds in the business community that teach certain skill sets like how to be a coach or how to market, but they don't teach how to sell. And so, I'm a great guest speaker in those opportunities. And whenever I can speak and like teach and share my content, it's easy for people to want more and to kind of jump into the next step. The other thing that we do is we run challenges, so that's the salesisgood.com is a free challenge that we can invite people to, where I can provide great content and training, and people get to experience working with me and then be invited to the next step. So I'm kind of old school and all of that. I'm getting deeper into like working on the funnels, and we've definitely played with Facebook ads. In August or January, spent 6K a month, and that wasn't super effective. And I know there's a
yeah.
lot of ways to do things, and we're able to have a little bit of profit with stuff like that. But for me, relationships are still by far the best source. But being willing to be bold and confident and believe in yourself enough to go to your relationships and have real conversations.
Yeah, I think for you, like, your biggest asset is your speaking, like your ability to, even in this podcast, like articulate a certain message and get people feeling good about like what they're doing.
Mm-hmm,
And so Facebook ads is tough, right? You to do something in a very short period of time.
mm-hmm,
But like one of the things, have you played around a lot with like webinars? Like, I think one thing that could do really well for you would be if you went on LinkedIn. Two different ways. You can do a webinar where it's on Zoom,
mm-hmm,
or you could do a social audio event.
mm-hmm.
And you do a social audio event, but the thing I like about LinkedIn is that you can invite out all your connections.
That's
So
cool.
you put it up, and then you can invite like 300 people to it, right? Like I
Yeah.
did one, and it's one of those things. Have you ever done something that works really well, and for some reason you just don't do it again?
Mm.
I did a social audio event a while ago that was really successful. Hour of my time, it resulted in
Mhm,
about like $10,000 of sales. I
mhm.
don't know why I haven't done it since.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know why we need to get on that. But my point is that I think you would do really well there. And the beautiful thing is it doesn't cost you a fucking dime. Like
Right.
ads is one of those weird things where like I've tried ads. Like we did a workshop last year. I dropped like 20 grand into ads, you know, and then literally a week before the event, I literally just started getting on calls with people, just doing cold outreach, and I did way better financially than the ads. And I said, after that, I was like, I'm not doing these.
Yeah, to me, like warm outreach is the best, then cold outreach that's free, and then ads. And people should really only get into the ad game when they're ready for massive scale. They built a thriving business and they've got enough like expendable income and cash flow that, you know, if you test for 10 grand or 20 grand or 30 grand and you lose, it's okay. It's kind of like going to the casino. You know, running ads are like going to the casino. Don't go with money you're not willing to lose. If you're willing to lose it, sure, get in the game, have fun, check it out, see what happens. Maybe you'll win, but you're probably going to lose at least the first few times. And so at some point, you know, it can be part of a strategy. And eventually, I suppose, with enough money available to you, enough cash flow, it could be your full strategy. But I think that's another place where new coaches and entrepreneurs make a mistake is they want to get into the ad game. They think, again, what's the easiest way? And what can I do to avoid like having a real sales conversation with somebody? Like they just want click and buy, click and buy, click and buy. And it doesn't exist with the kind of ease that people hope it will. And so again, like build a 6-figure plus business. And then when you've got enough cash flow on the side and you want to try ads as a part of the strategy, great. But I don't think it's appropriate for that to be all the strategy. I think the cold outreach or LinkedIn strategy you're talking about, webinars, challenges, those things are good ideas. Speaking, podcasts, those are good ideas. And it's going to look different for each person, but find 1 or 2 strategies. YouTube, make excellent strategy, 1 or 2 that are right for you, because, you know, you can listen, you could have 100 people on this podcast and everyone can give you their different strategy and be like, this is the way. And sure, this is the way. Some of them are, and they all are for that person.
Was that a
who's sharing
Mandalorian
it.
plug right
It was. It was. It was a little Mandalorian plug since maybe we like the same shows. But the reality is there is no one way. You have to find your way. I do think a warm lead is always easiest. A free lead is always better than one that you had to pay for because it's more profitable. And so if you can win in those areas, great. People who are warm and know you are highly more efficient. People who are cold but are free are highly more profitable. And people you have to pay for to be cold leads are the least profitable, but there's a volume opportunity there potentially over time for the right businesses.
Well, that's why I also like asking every guest, like, what's your lead generation strategy? Because I've heard so many different variations of it, and I've tried. I think it's like part of my job as like, you know, as an agency owner. I've tried. I wouldn't say every way, but I've tried a lot because it's like I have to test it for my clients, right? And one of the things I've realized is, you know, the reason why I suggested to you, hey, I think social audio on LinkedIn might be really good for you, is because I've also, you know, we've tried it with other clients. It didn't work. Right. And it's because they don't know how to talk or they don't know how to sell. Like there's also a part of this too, where it's like some strategies won't work. Like, for example, one of our strategies we often talk about is doing a podcast, because you can have relationship and have conversation that usually goes somewhere, but it doesn't work if you don't know how to find the opportunity. Right. Because it's not just, hey, there's a guest, that guest is a potential client. It's also that guest could refer you. That guest could, you know, be a referral partner. They could, you know, there's tons of different ways, but the person running the strategy has to think that way. And that's why also, like, you know, one of the things I like about, again, you having a sales background is you know how to see the opportunity, where some coaches, they don't see it. They don't know how to make, not see the opportunity. They don't know how to approach or be assertive with the strategy, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so totally.
All right. Any final things you want to throw out there? Again, I'll have all your links in the description, but anything final you want to leave with everybody?
Yeah, let me share like an idea on opening sales calls. Because I think that this can be tricky for a lot of people. And what I know, like when I was at Cutco, when I was 18 years old and making sales for the first time, I remember I tried to build rapport for as long as possible before beginning the actual sales conversation, like small talk as long as you can. And I'd come back to the office and we'd be like bragging about like, I was like 45 minutes before I started the presentation. I knew they were going to buy, like, ridiculous stuff like that where we're wasting people's time, but at the time it sounded like a good idea. And I think like multi-level marketing, you know, people like oftentimes they like it seems like they're going to lunch with you or taking you out for coffee because they want to become your friend. And at the end, there's a pitch they knew nothing about because they just small talked for the entire time and it wasn't leading anywhere. And I just think that sales does feel sleazy when it's lacking transparency. And I think sales avoidance, even for the sake of our own fear, ends up making it seem like we're there for something different than we are. And all of a sudden we start getting into sales conversation. It's awkward and strange. And so I think sales feels really good when it's transparent and honest. So for me, I'm going to get into rapport in like 30 or 60 seconds on a sales call. I'm going to ask how they're doing, how their day's been, maybe respond with how my day's been great. I'm going to pay attention to how they communicate, their energy, their emotion, speed, volume of communication, like their tone, those sorts of things. So I can like communicate in a language they can receive. But I can get all of that in a minute and really understand where they're at and how they're doing and meet them where they're at. But then I'm going to transition pretty quickly into a pre-frame. And a pre-frame is structuring the sales conversation and inviting people to what's going to happen next. And then, of course, getting consent to sell. And this, if we do just this one thing well, the rest of the sales conversation, no matter what you do next, becomes so much easier. Would it be all right if I give an example of
I was
this?
gonna say, give me your pre-frame because I call it
Yeah.
setting the stage.
Yeah,
So it's the
exactly.
same
Setting the
shit, right? So
stage.
what was yours sound like?
Yeah, mine's something like this. Like, hey, John, thanks so much for taking the time to connect. I want to make the best use of your time and mine. So I just like to lay out a simple structure for this call. Would that be cool? All
Yeah.
right, great. So the reason we're talking is Raylan tells me that you're a great coach and also a man of faith. And I work with Christian coaches to help them optimize their business model, their pricing, and their sales strategies so they can scale their income and their impact. My outcome on a call like this today is to get to know you a bit and to discover whether or not it's a fit for us to work together. And the way I'd like to get to that outcome is by asking you some questions about where you're at in your business right now, what your vision for the future is, and what some of the challenges are that you're facing. From there, I'll give you some perspective and coaching based on what I hear that I'm sure can help right away today. And if it seems like a good fit, I'll explain really specifically how I work with my clients so that you and I can decide either to work together or not work together. And either way is fine. Does that sound good? And
Yeah.
that sounds good. And it's professional. And I've done this before. And they're with a leader and they don't need to lead the call. Be like, well, how much is this going to cost me? Or so what do we do next? Like there's real leadership, real transparency, consent, and like a structure. And they're like, okay, cool. I can just sit back and like be along for the ride. Then I'm going to make the call all about them and ask a lot of great questions. And only at the end am I going to invite them if it seems like a fit. If they're committed to solving a problem I can help solve, then I'm going to invite them to my program. And so I think that we can take some pressure off and make things a lot easier by starting the call the right way.
Well, what I love about it too, because again, it's very similar to my setting the stage, and that one we get right to it, but also part of it is we're making a decision on this call. Like
Yes.
it's like,
Yes.
hey, by the end of this, we're gonna decide something together. Either one, you're gonna take
Mm-hmm.
everything I gave you and you're gonna run with it, or
Mm-hmm.
B, we're gonna work together. We're
Yes.
gonna figure that out together at the end. Does that sound good? So that way
Yes.
they're not surprised at the end when you pitch them. It's just like, hey,
There's
like because
no
also,
surprise.
yeah,
David
I
said
also
yes.
I really don't like because Grant, I'm very direct. And
Mm-hmm.
so I've even said to people on the call before, like, just so you know, by the end of this, I'm getting a yes or a no, no maybes.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Like one of the two
Love
is gonna
that.
happen. And by the way, if it's a no, it's all good. Like I'm the
Mm-hmm.
stuff I'm gonna tell you in this call is gonna also give you a result anyway.
Sure.
But one of the things that people do a lot now, granted, this is just from my own background in sales. I was the worst follow-up guy in the world. I had
Mm-hmm.
back in the old corporate days, I had a 70% close rate. And
Mm-hmm.
the average for the company was like 45. And the
Mm-hmm.
reason mine was so high was because I knew if you didn't buy, Justin, I'm not calling you again.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm not I'm
Mm-hmm.
terrible with follow-up. I knew I wasn't gonna fucking email you again. So I was like, I
Yeah.
need to get the sale today or it's not
Yeah.
happening. Right.
Yeah.
And so like I just kind of developed this thing along the way where I was like, I just don't want to waste your time and I don't want to have to fucking
Mm-hmm.
follow up with you for
Yeah.
6 months. Either
Yeah.
you're gonna say yes, and by the way, even if, and I guess for the listeners, one thing to kind of take away, at least from this part of it, is like don't be afraid to freaking just put it out there, like
Yeah.
because like the worst thing for me is not a no,
Yeah.
it's a maybe. That is like that
Yeah.
hurts my soul because then what happens?
Yeah.
For a couple weeks, you're thinking, oh, I think he might. Like, have you ever done this thing where like, oh, it's like a 70%, like I don't know, like
Mm-hmm.
70% maybe, like we'll
Mm-hmm.
see. That's the worst. Get the
Yeah.
freaking yes, and in some cases, what I mean by yes is a deadline. Like, for example, I had a call with somebody the other day that we're going to work with through our agency, and he goes, it's a yes, Raylan. Like I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing it. I need to do it though in May. I go,
Mhm.
cool. Like that works too. That's not a
Yeah.
maybe. That's a I'm doing it. Here's when I'm doing it.
Yeah.
Cool. Now we're clear. In the meantime, you can send them some stuff, but
Yeah.
leaving the call with a maybe is death to me.
Yeah, my process is very similar. A slight difference for me, it's like I must end the call with a yes, a no, or the next call booked. I'm never gonna like leave the call with like a maybe where I'm like, it's that awkward thing too. Like, have I followed up too much? Are they ghosting me? Did they get my message? When should I
Yeah.
message? It's like it just causes all kinds of conflict and it doesn't feel very good. If for me, if somebody really like if we've got a high price program, they really want to talk to their spouse, they want to pray on it, they want to sleep on it, fine, let's talk tomorrow. When can we schedule a 15-minute call? So I'm willing to give people a day or two, but I
Yeah.
want to have that next call booked. I'm not going to reach out because the same as you, my follow up is poor. And if somebody's like in 3 months, let's talk, I'll be cool. Let's book the call right now because my calendar fills up. I'm sure yours does too. Then I never have to think about it. I've closed the loop. So for me, yes, no, or next call booked. But I respect, maybe's the worst. We don't want
Yeah.
maybe, and it's not actually good for them either. We should help them close the loop. If we're a great coach, a great leader,
Yeah.
part of our job is helping people avoid passivity and move into action and make a decision one way or the other. And so I think even giving that frame can be helpful. But for me, yes, no, or next call already booked before that call ends.
Yeah, and and also setting the expectation. Like, are you setting what kind of what are you saying when they book the be back or the next call?
Yeah, yeah. So let's say that they're saying that they need to talk to their spouse, etc. Great, cool. Why don't we do that? Can we schedule a 15-minute call for tomorrow or the next day to make a decision? They always say yes. Awesome. So I'm setting this in the calendar. If we don't need 15 minutes, I'm going to put it for 30 minutes, but if we don't need that much, we'll just take a few minutes. This is an opportunity for me to answer any final questions and for us to make a decision on whether or not to move forward. Sound good?
Yeah.
It's like they're like they know this is, and I'm calling it decision call in the
Yeah.
title of it. Like they know that this is about decision, and I'm very big on language patterns and the words that we use. So I'm going to really work decision into this, and that they know what the frame is for the call.
No, I love that you call how you frame that in terms of like we're going to be on this call to make a decision.
Yeah.
Like the one other way, it's the same kind of premise, but I don't know that we do this anymore. We used to. I still really like it, but I used to call it just an onboarding call.
Yeah.
So I just assumed the sale. So I would just say like, all right,
Yeah.
cool. Like, let's do this then. In a week, I'm scheduling your onboarding call. I'm gonna be there to get you set up, and I hope you're there.
That's great.
like it's just that way when you're on this damn call, like we're getting set up.
Mm-hmm.
Same kind of
Yep.
concept, but again, I like your frame of like because also the only reason why I didn't love because I did this before, I didn't love because it was like then I get on a call for 15 minutes and it was more like objection handling and I was like and
Mm-hmm.
then they would say no anyway or I mean and then I was like what the fuck am I on this call for? So then I
Mm-hmm.
just started doing
Mm-hmm.
like no, this is an onboarding call.
Yeah.
Like that was it.
Yeah.
Like
That's
and that way
cool. I
you have a
like it.
week to figure your shit out and then we're gonna get started.
Sure. Sure.
But listen, man, this was tons of fun, dude. And real quick to let people know where they can find your podcast as well, because I also like that
Yeah.
your podcasts are short, like really
Yeah.
short hitters. Like you bring the
Yeah.
value. I think I saw one for like 8 minutes. Like you're not dilly
Yeah.
dallying around there. So talk about the
Yeah.
podcast real quick.
Yeah, the podcast is Sales Strategies for Christian Coaches. You can get it anywhere you listen to podcasts. Sales Strategies for Christian Coaches, and yeah, they're like 8 to 22 minutes, short to the point, something that can help this week when your business model or design, pricing, mindset, and sales strategy. And yeah, I'd love for you to listen in.
All right, thanks, man. And this was a great episode, dude. Again, huge fan of yours. You got a new fan, dude. I appreciate you.
All right, thanks for having me. It's fun.
All right, later, dude. Thank you for listening to The Elevated Entrepreneur. If you want to check out more about the guest, look at the description below. And as always, if you're a beginner coach or even someone that's seasoned and you're looking to join a community of like-minded individuals, learn about branding, lead generation, sales, you name it, think about applying to the Elevated Coaches Academy. You can learn more about that in the description below. I look forward to having you in the next episode, and we'll talk to you soon. Stay motivated, stay elevated.